now Brian Ellis, the maitre d' at Melvyn's in Palm Springs, is going to regale us with some great old Hollywood stories at the historic Ingleside Inn.
Hello, Joni. Welcome to Melvyn's restaurant here at the Ingleside Inn. My name is Brian Ellis. I've been the maitre d' here at Melvyn since 1975 when we first opened. And we're here on a Sunday afternoon at the Ingleside Inn, Melvyn's Restaurant Lounge, where we're going to listen to some great music on our jam session that we've been doing now for the last 18 years from 3:30 to 7:30. We have great musicians, great singers, some great talent. Why don't we just take a stroll and listen to some music? Well, Joni, for all the years that we've been in business, we have been very, very privileged and honored to have waited and served some of the top dignitaries in our world, both politically and in show business. And I just want to share a couple of stories with you. Governor Schwarzenegger, he used to stay here a lot with his now ex-wife. And dine in the restaurant a lot. And he used to, back in those days, you could smoke cigarettes, and he used to smoke a cigar. And I had a customer come up to me and says, "Brian, you got to do something about this guy. I can't have him smoking cigars in the restaurant." This was a customer telling me this. I says, "Look at the size of that guy. You think I'm going to tell him he can't smoke a cigar?" He says, "You go tell him he can't smoke a cigar." There's one other story talking about big celebrities, Hollywood stars. It was Marlon Brando. He used to come in back in the 70s and 80s. I went to my boss, Mr. Cabarrus, "You want to meet Marlon Brando?" He says, "I would love to." I said, "Why don't your picture taken?" He said, "That would be great." So anyway, I took Mr. Cabarrus over to Marlon Brando, and I said, "Mr. Brando, would you mind if my boss had his picture taken with?" He says, "Not at all." So I came up to Mr. Cabarrus' office, I got the camera, I went down and I shot about 6 or 7 pictures. Thanked Mr. Brando, who was a sweetheart, and came up, put the camera back in Mr. Cabarrus' office. I go back to the restaurant. Mr. Cabarrus says, "Go up to the camera and get the film out of the camera." Well, I came up to his office, and there was no film in that camera, and I got to tell you something, I wanted to die. I wanted to get out of here as quick as I could. There was no exit. I had to go down and face Mr. Haber and explain to him, "Boss, Mr. Haber, there was no film in the camera." So I went down there, ate crow, and I thought he was going to throw me out of the place, but we just laughed about it, and we just moved on for the rest of the night. Everyone asks us day in and day out about Frank Sinatra. When Frank Sinatra passed away, we had 6 satellite trucks on our property, and he was just a regular guy. He would come in and hang out at the bar. We'd have a lot of dinners here. But I recall one afternoon I get a phone call from a longtime friend of his, Charlie Spatz, wants to do a party for Frank Sinatra at the restaurant. Only one condition. I said, "What's that, Mr. Spatz? You don't tell my boss, Mr. Haber." I said, "Charlie, I got to tell him he's my boss." He says, "No." And I says, "Why?" He's because Mr. Haber will come over to the table and want his picture taken with Frank Sinatra. So I went to Alan Mald, who was my boss at the time. I said, "Alan, I got a situation. What is it?" I said, "Charlie Spatz just called. Frank Sinatra's coming to dinner. We can't tell Mr. Haber." Alan says, "Don't worry, I'll handle it." About 5 minutes later, I got a call from Mr. Haber in his office up here. And he says, "Brian, can you come up and see me?" Right then, I knew I was in trouble. Anyway, he came up and he asked me who's coming in tonight. And I says, "I can't tell you." He says, "Why not?" "Because you're going to bother Mr. Sinatra and you're going to want his picture taken with him all the time." And so that particular night, Mr. Haber didn't come to work. But he's just one of the big celebrities that would come in. It was really funny when Frank would come in and walk into the dining room. There was a certain amount of power and mystique. It was like no other person got the attention that Frank Sinatra got when he came into his restaurant. Well, I'm going to go back in time. Back in the 70s, 80s, we also entertained the Cabarrus Sisters, and that was always amazing because they'd take a round table. Each sister had a makeup case in front of her, a small mirror, and a fan, and they would go through the whole course of the evening after almost each bite, after each course, redoing their makeup, redoing their lipstick, and making sure their hair was perfect. We used to always have a lot of fun taking care of the Cabarrus Sisters back in the early days. I think maybe we should head back down and listen to a little music at the Sunday jam session. Well, that's a Sunday afternoon at the jam session at Melvyn's restaurant. Joni, back to you.
Thanks, Brian. You're a regular raconteur.